This webinar is going to be about creating web maps, and I think most people are familiar with the ANR Atlas, and that is a web map, although it's a little bit of a kitchen sink of a web map. We're going to be talking specifically about ArcGIS online web mapping applications, and what do I mean by that? So I have a few examples I'm going to show here, so I'm going to close out of this. One of those examples is right now we have communities going out doing what are called roadside ash inventories. So these roadside ash inventories are communities who are going out and surveying ash trees along the road. And this is a mapping application that I think I'm zoomed in a little bit. Hold on, let me adjust my zoom level here to 100%. Notice those lines going across the map. Usually that's an indicator that you're zoomed in a little too much. So I'm going to set that. And we're going to show you this online web map, and this is what's called a dashboard mapping application. So this takes a web map that I have published and includes inventories of those ash trees using our collector application. So you'll start seeing points now. And those points indicate surveyed trees along the roadside that those communities have done using the collector application. Now the map in of itself is just a map window, but within our ArcGIS online web mapping application, we're able to add these widgets that do things such as show counts of those trees that have been surveyed. It shows bar charts or graphs of the attributes of those particular trees, and we can add those all just by dragging and dropping some of those controls in the window. So this is one example of that. Another example is the household hazardous materials convenience map, and I won't get too far into this one, but this is a map that was published by Ryan, who shows waste facilities in Vermont within specific driving distances, and those driving distances were calculated using tools within ArcGIS Online. And this is, a fairly simple map viewer that I'm actually going to walk through with most of you all today to show how you can also create a similar map and create an application that has tools that you can then publish and then link to as well. Another example, across Vermont we had an urban tree inventory, and the communities were going out and inventorying trees within their communities, not just ash trees, but all trees along urban roadways. And what the goal was here was to publish a map that we could then create an application for those communities to manage those applications. And what we did is we created this application for individual towns with their own logins to edit those. So if I click OK, this is another just basic editing application where you can go in and see those trees that had been inventoried, along with things like parcels and base map information. And you'll see tools here like locate, filter, print, etc. All are widgets that you can add to applications after you publish a map. Another example of what we'll also be talking about today. Most recently, I created a map for private well reports. So this is a pretty basic application that shows a base map, and then the points on the map are private well locations. So if I click on any one of these, it's going to give me information based off of a private well, where I can get well reports, or I can also generate well reports, open up attribute tables. I can even change the base map. This is a base map widget that comes pretty stock on most applications, and I can change this to a light gray background if I find that the imagery is a little too much. Very basic map that takes very little time to create, published using a pretty basic template application, and then deployed to our web servers that helps well drillers identify wells and generate reports. So those are a few examples of what our ArcGIS online web maps are, and I'm going to go through how to create those maps, where to find the data, where that data sits, and how to create an application which then you can publish to and perhaps host on one of your program websites. So I'm going to fire up a new browser here. And so getting started with maps, the first thing that you're going to need to do, or actually what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you a link, and I'll provide all these links to everyone in the team. All of the links of which I'll go over now. I will provide that to you in an email. But this is a helpful link straight from arcgis.com called Getting Started with Maps. And it kind of goes through the basic steps of creating maps, changing styles, and all of these links go into some detail as to how to configure this information or how to configure those widgets and maps, etc. So I'll send this out to everyone, but I'm pretty much going to go through those links and all of these steps in this webinar. The first thing we'll need to do is sign in, and we do that by our own portal link. And our portal link is pretty simple. It's vtanr.maps.arcgis.com. And what you'll have to do is it'll ask you, well, actually, I think I'm not signed in. Oh, yes, I am. I'm sorry. So I'm going to go ahead and sign out so show you exactly what it looks like when you first hit this link. And what this does is it brings you to our organizational homepage. So the Vermont Agency of Natural Resources has its own organization page where we publish our content to, where we host maps, where we host data, applications, etc. And you can use this as is without signing in. You will not be able to do certain things like save maps, but you could create a map if you wanted to. You just wouldn't be able to save it. You certainly won't be a member of any groups, but you can go through and browse some of our content that we have as featured content on our homepage. But I think what I said in my email is that I was hoping that everyone would have a sign-in as to one of your own accounts, so that when you're creating your own maps, you can save them to your account and be a part of our organization. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click the sign in up here, and we're going to use our own sign in here at ANR. And this is our admin account. So when I sign in, it's going to bring me to my organization page, which shows a bunch of our administrative dashboard. So it shows us how many credits, and when we publish data items or maps, or we go through some of those processing steps, it consumes credits. So we only have a certain number of credits to use within a given year, so that's displayed here. So here are all of our members that we have given out. So many of you have probably spoken to either Ryan or I about creating an account that you will use for signing in. And we're only allowed 33 named users. And those named users have specific permissions where you can save content, and we can share those members into groups, and within those groups we can share content for those that are out doing things like mobile feature collection. You're all part of a group that we share those maps to, and that's why you see them when you log into Collector and not everything. And then it gives you a cool little dashboard about things of our latest content, which some of that will be going over today, as you'll see here. So there's different tabs, which I probably won't get into, but these show the different sign-ins that we have, what the status is, licenses, etc. But what I want to show most is this content tab, and then we'll get into the map. So I'm going to click content in our organization, And within content, you'll see everything that our agency has access to. And most of this has been items that either Ryan or myself have published for access to give access to things like our open data portal, web mapping applications, collector mapping collector apps, metrics, etc. All of those are items that are found within our organization under content. And over on the left, you'll notice that there are folders. So what I'm showing here is all of our content, but if you scroll to the left, you'll notice some folders that we have set up, which host certain items that are published through different applications. So here you'll see some open data folders that we've set up. So if I open, say, the ecologic open data folder, you'll see a series of feature layers that are published as items and are made available through our open data site. So if I click on one of these feature layers, it gives the description, as well as you can access the metadata. But all of these open data items we can use by opening in a map viewer. And all of these are shared within that open data group, which can then be displayed through our open data site. And that'll be important to note when we go to create our map, because all of these feature layers are layers that you can add to your ArcGIS online map, which I'll go over in just a moment. But I did want to point out the folder structure over here, not necessarily the structure, but giving some tips as to what you might be able to do with your logins by setting up folders that could be specific to projects or certain themes within your own programs. And it just kind of helps to organize your data. For any of these items, I can check off one of these items and then, click move, and it'll allow me to move to a different folder. So even if you have some items, it could be maps, it could be links to other layers or other items that you've created. You can select those and move those into folders that you create by clicking this create new folder option. So I think that's all I'll get into within the content section. Most of you will have fairly limited content in your items because you haven't created much. So if you'll create maps, and once those maps are saved, it'll show up in your content here, and I'll go over that in just a moment as well. But for A&R as a whole, we've shared a ton of information, and part of our effort to getting our data to the Vermont Open Geodata Portal was part of that process was publishing all of our GIS information into items within ArcGIS Online and sharing that with the Vermont Center for Geographic Information to host on the Open Geodata Portal. So let's get to the map. So I think that's what everyone's here for. So what I'm going to do is up at the top, there's a map link. Excuse me, and I'm going to click that map link. And what it's going to do is it's going to open up a blank map. So not very specific, but immediately we'll notice that it's already kind of set up for us. So we've got a map. Over on the left, you notice content, which we haven't added much content yet for. There's a legend. There's no legend because we haven't added any layers. But we can go ahead and we can even change this base map by clicking the base map option and choosing from any of the base maps within the gallery of ArcGIS Online. And these are our good starting points for navigating the map from the beginning, but we are able to also create our own base maps. We don't have to use these ArcGIS base maps, but 9 times out of 10 they actually serve their purpose. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose the imagery, just plain imagery for now, because I think what I want to do is add my own base map information. So here we are. That was pretty quick, right? So here we are, the imagery of the United States. We're going to create a Vermont map, so I'm going to go ahead and zoom over here to Vermont. I do this by holding the Shift key and drawing a bounding box across what should be the state of Vermont. So here we are. We've got some imagery. I can zoom in and out, but I need to add some content. So some base map information would help. So how do we add content to our new map? So what you'll do is you'll click the add button over here, and we can add data from different sources. So the first option is to search for layers, and what this is going to do is search for layers within ArcGIS Online. And this kind of not very obvious drop down right here is really an important one, because what this will do is it will filter your search results based off of different areas within ArcGIS Online. So we have it defaults to my content. So my content is going to be anything that has been published by your own user account. So everything that's specific to you, or specific to people that you are specific to whom you've shared stuff to. So for instance, if I create a map and share it specifically with your user account, I believe it will show up in my content, but I'd have to double check on that. But what I would recommend choosing for most of you is to search within either my organization or ArcGIS Online. Now, my organization are going to be all data layers that have been published by the Agency of Natural Resources. So this will include all of our open data sets, as well as some items that we might have published for basic mapping purposes. And one of those might be a base map. So I've published a vector tile map, which is a high performance base map layer that includes everything from town boundaries, parcels, hydrography, labels, etc. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to search for base map. And while I do that, you notice these icons over here where it says data VTANR or service VTANR. Those are the icons for our open data sets. So if you see that thumbnail next to certain data layers, you know that that data is a statewide data set that we have shared within our open data portal. So these are good bets for layers to add to your map, because you know that they're recent updated data sets with metadata. So if you see those, don't hesitate to add those to your map. But I'm looking for a base map. I get two results. I get a Vermont vector tile base map, and then the Vermont base map that's been stylized. So the difference here is they're basically the same data, but one has been stylized to perform better within the online map. So what I can do is I could either click on it or use the plus button, and this will add it directly to my map. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and add this to my map. You know how quick that was. Use the back button, and I can then see it in the contents of my map. So I can go in, I can zoom in now and see how this vector tile based map works. So within just a few clicks, we already have imagery and roads, parcels, town boundaries, county boundaries, labels, shields, all added to our map. And it took, maybe all of 5 minutes to do if I weren't talking. So very quick setup to an initial map. You know, how long would that have taken to set up an ArcMap project? It might have taken someone half an hour to an hour, maybe even more, to add all these data layers, symbolize them, and get them so that and prepare the map to add your additional data sets. So over here, we've got our layer, and it says Vermont base map stylized. Although stylized is cool, what I want to do is I'm going to rename this. I want to give it a name that would be okay to show in your web mapping application. So I'm going to go ahead. I choose these. it's kind of an important button down here. It's kind of your layer options. So I'm going to go ahead and choose layer options and rename. I can give this a new name. I'm just going to remove stylized out of here. Vermont base map. Cool. All right, there we go. What are some of the other options in here? I can zoom to it, which we already are. There's a transparency option, so this will be helpful with other data sets, especially polygons that we might add to the map that you'd like to see the underlying information to, and I can set the transparency of this. See it? Yeah, it's getting more transparent, but should be good on that. I can set a visibility range. So instead of setting the visibility like you do in ArcMap, where you specify a specific scale, in this case they kind of give you a suggested range. So they're saying the current visibility range, it's set at state, and you'll see this black triangle right here. That's your current map extent. So if I move this out any further, it's probably going to cause this to disappear, because that is beyond the scale range. So if I set this inside, there we go. Sorry, backwards. If I set this inside, it's going to turn it off. So this is the visible scale range from which that layer will be visible. This is where the current map extent is. So you'll see that it's not within that range. So what I need to do is extend it out beyond the current extent, and it'll turn back on. So you have to kind of play around with it a little bit in order to get it where you want it. So in the case where, you know, it might be the opposite, where you don't want it to show up too close, so maybe this is too close, you'll see that it turned off, and that's partially because of the scale range, but also because of it might not have been cached to a certain scale. But then you would set this further out beyond the current extent of the map, which is that triangle. So this shouldn't matter, because the cache or the way that the layer was set up is meant to turn off at a certain scale. But if I back it out, it'll turn back on. So that's visible scale range. It's important, not necessarily for the base map, but for all future layers that you'll add to the map. Okay, so that's the base map. We've added a layer from our items within our organization. We kind of have to make a decision now as to what kind of map we're going to make. So I talked with a few users at the agency and said, well, you know, what are some maps that we need to publish? And one user was saying, well, we need to create a forest legacy program map that shows the forest legacy area, so that residents or homeowners can determine whether or not they were within the forest legacy area to see if they're eligible for the forest legacy program. And it was kind of a question like, can we just add it to the atlas so that people can use the atlas to find it? But you know, we're really just talking about a single layer here with a map that's fairly basic. Throw on some base map information. It seems like a map that would be better suited for something like ArcGIS Online. So what I did is what we will do is set up a map with the forest legacy area, maybe add a few other data sets, and I'll show you some other data sources to add data from to set up that map. So what we need to do now is add that forest legacy area to this map. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go back and search for layers within my organization. And I have added, what did I call it? Forest legacy. Let's go here and search. And there it is. Forest legacy area. The AON is the assessment of need, which was the process for finding that forest legacy area. And I just hit the plus. I'm going to add it to the map. And there it is. Now, some might be asking, well, how did that data get added to the map? It was just a GIS layer within our organization, within our SDE or GIS database. How did we get it so we could search for it on the web? And to answer that, I did it through ArcGIS Pro, and I told Ryan I probably wasn't going to show this because not everyone has access to publish layers to the web. But this is how I did it, and this is how we can do it. But there's a little bit of a vetting process because we don't want everyone publishing a bunch of information to the web because, as I showed, we have a limited amount of credits, and we want to make sure that we're not publishing up a bunch of heavy data sets that consume all our credits at once. But within ArcGIS Pro, and I think there's 20 installs, I think Ryan said, within the agency that now have ArcGIS Pro. But one of the options, if I right click on a layer, I can go share, and I can share as a web layer. And what this does is it shares this particular data set, which is coming from our GIS database, so SDE, GDB, ANR, and DDEV, which is our SQL Server database that hosts, pretty much all of our enterprise GIS data. I go in here, go to share as a web layer, give it a name, summary. I can give it some tags. I share it as a feature layer. And you'll hear this quite a bit. And I can even specify a folder, and it knows what folders I have because I'm signed in using our account to access ArcGIS Pro. Give it a folder, who do I want to share it with, share, etc. And the next thing you know, it's added as an item, as content within my ArcGIS Online organizational account, from which I can then add to my online map. So that was the workflow for publishing this particular data set. Now, what I think I will do also is show you some other data sources from which you can add data to your map. So I showed you content from our organization, but another source, and then like I said, I'm going to give you these links in an email, is through mapping services that we publish for things like the Natural Resources Atlas. So this is what's called a REST endpoint. So this is a REST services directory, and it looks kind of daunting. But there's a ton of information in here. All of these are mapping services that we've published from ArcMap documents. And so if I go in and click on one of these, so so I'm going to highlight this here. These are all services that publish data for use in the Natural Resources Atlas. So all of these are prefixed with ANR Atlas. And if I choose, say, the FPR service, it'll give you a listing of all of the layers that are available to the Natural Resources Atlas through this service. And all of them are listed as links. So if I click FPR, it shows all of these layers, and this is a group layer within Forest Parks and Recreation. There are these layers. This is another group for trails. These are all layers. You can click on the layer to get some specific information, but I don't think you need to really concern yourself with this. But kind of the take-home message is, this is a service that came directly from an ArcMap document. So this ArcMap document contains all of the same layers that we publish as, let me show you, share as a service. So once this is shared as a service, it ends up here. And once it's here, we can add these layers to our map for certain mapping applications such as ArcGIS Online. So I chose, say I'm looking for an FPR layer, and say I want to add the E911 trails to my map. How do I do that? What you need is the link to these layers within this REST endpoint. So if I right click on trails, I can copy the link address. Now if I go over to my map and I choose add, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add a layer from the web. And what type of data are you referencing? We are referencing an ArcGIS server web service. This is a REST endpoint that is a web service. And I'm going to go ahead and paste that link that I took from this REST endpoint, Trails E911, copy link address. And I'm doing this again because it's important. I'm going to paste it in here as the URL. And it's important to make sure that your URL is consistent with your map. So I like to use all links as HTTPS, add layer. And it brings me out in the middle of the ocean. And that's just because the extent probably isn't properly set on that layer. But if I go in and I zoom back into Vermont, I should see those E911 trails start to show, and they do. They show up in the pink line work here. These are all trails. And this is how the layer is then displayed in your map. So obviously that layer name isn't very helpful. And what I can do is I can go in and rename it. So I'm going to remove the service name out of here, click OK. And now we have trails in our map. And that all came from ANR's REST endpoint that we publish for use in web mapping applications, mostly the Atlas, but we use these as hosted. These would be what do we call published feature layer items. So these don't consume credits. I guess that's the take home. So we also have different maps, map services like BioFinder. There's some services in here like well, the Atlas base map will include base map information. Oh, that one's unavailable. It's the base map Lite, excuse me. So if you need to add individual base map items to your map, maybe you want to add, building E911 buildings, or you need to add, village greens. You can do that from this base map. So it's a good place to find data layers that you can add to your map that you might not find within open data, because that's an important note. Not all data that we have access to for our online web maps is an open data item, but you can use this REST endpoint to go in and potentially find layers that we may have not published. There is another map service that I will also provide the group, and that is VCGI. Oh, excuse me, it didn't. The link didn't work. Let me grab the link here. VCGI also has a REST endpoint for map services that they have published for their open data portal. So all of these are map services that you could also add to your ArcGIS online web map. So an important one might be Parcels. You'll notice that there are two versions of Parcels. There's an SP and a WM. So SP stands for State Plane, where WM stands for Web Mercator. And what exactly does that mean? Well, if the plan for your web map, and if you're using ArcGIS Online, they all are going to use the Web Mercator coordinate system, because Esri and all third-party mapping applications use Web Mercator as their coordinate system. And that's because it's kind of I guess it's the base mapping service for the entire world. Since we're using base map services that span outside of the state of Vermont, we need to use or play nice with the coordinate system for that mapping application. So that's why we publish two different versions of these services, because in these web mapping applications such as ArcGIS Online, we need to use the Web Mercator coordinate system. So if I go in here and I highlight, if I access this service, I need to dig in a little bit deeper. And if I want to add the standardized parcel polygons, I'll right-click this layer, copy link address, go back to my map, add layer from the web, and enter and paste this layer into my map. So now I should have parcel polygons that come from VCGI's map service. Go in here and I can rename it to, I'll call this Parcels. Click OK. Cool. So now we have a few different layers from which we can work with here. but we're not totally done. We're not exactly keen on the symbology for all of this in here. So what sort of options do we have for configuring our map? So I showed you some of the limited options we have for the vector tile based map. But if we go over to some of the other items, individual layers within the map, you notice that we have some more options. So in this case, the forest legacy area is pretty dark. We want to make that more transparent. Give a little shade over the landscape. I don't know, 50%. That looks good. So what is the visibility range? So if I zoom out, can we see it statewide? Yeah, that looks good. We'll want to keep that on pretty much at all scales. And you'll notice that layers are will gray, will kind of deactivate in the map, like Parcels here is now grayed out. And the reason for that is because it's beyond the visible scale range. So you'll see our current map extent. This is our scale range for Parcels, which is probably appropriate. So those map services will specify those visible scale ranges, but we can override those in some instances, but I probably would urge most everyone to honor the set scale range if a layer has one, and because those are set for it might be set for performance reasons. I'm sure VCGI doesn't want us pinging their entire parcel service at statewide scale because it would probably bring their server down, so we don't want to do that, obviously. And I'll say that you have some level of control, but most of those map services are set for a reason, so we'll leave them. Other options, we can move layer order up and down. So if I want the legacy area above the trails, I can do that, or I can move it down. This is changing the layer order. I can have it hide the legend if we don't want any of these layers included in our legend. By hitting this legend button, I'll see what's included. So I can have it hidden in the legend or have it show the legend. All of these layers are going to have the ability to display a pop-up. And the pop-up is what happens when you click the map. So if I click the map, do I get information about the particular layer? So in this case, in the Forest Legacy area, I click and it has a pop-up set, but it's the default, and it gives me all of the attributes within that attribute table, which is not entirely helpful. So what we can do is we can choose the options and choose to configure the pop-up. So there's a whole mess of stuff in here that we can configure, but it's really cool what you can do. So within pop-ups, it's checked to show the pop-up. We can give it a title. Now, just showing what this is it's a placeholder to show an attribute of what has been clicked. So if I click this plus here, I can substitute any number of attributes in here to substitute for the title. Now it's showing acres, the revised acres in the pop-up title, which is not helpful. So what I want to include is, say, Forest Legacy Area. So now when someone clicks inside the Forest Legacy area, the title will be Forest Legacy Area. What we can do is we can configure attributes or the pop-up contents by either displaying a list of the field attributes, a description from one field, a custom attribute display, or no attribute information. 9 times out of 10, a list of the field attributes is helpful, but what I personally like to do is set up a custom attribute display. And what it allows me to do is set up in rich text HTML, format the pop-up in such a way where I can type some information, but I can also substitute in attributes where necessary. So if I choose a custom attribute display and click configure, I can then start creating the content that will display when this particular feature is clicked in the map. And since the attributes of this layer aren't entirely helpful or won't entirely be helpful to the end user, what I might put is this layer's purpose is to show where the forest legacy area is so that people will understand whether or not they're eligible for the forest legacy program. So what I might do is just say yes. And I'm going to I'll maybe make this big and bold, large. Maybe I'll make it green because we're green and happy. Say yes. Maybe make the text below it a little bit smaller and black, and say, well, let me type it first. You are eligible for the Forest Legacy Program because this is within the Forest Legacy area. Done. So I can format this text using all of these options up here. I'll go ahead and I'm gonna make this small. Doesn't need to be bold. Click OK. So there's our custom attribute display. I won't get too much into expressions or pop-up media. You can create charts or add specific images that would appear in the pop-up if necessary. But maybe the follow-up webinar we can get into that a little bit more. But for now, I'm just going to go ahead and click OK. So now, when I click the forest within the Forest Legacy area, it says, yes, this is Forest Legacy area. Yes, you are eligible for the Forest Legacy program. Basically everything that we put in that pop-up. So cool. It's a little more helpful. It's not giving us a bunch of numbers, wondering what those are. If I don't click in there, I'm not going to get anything, but if I click inside it, it will give me the pop-up for that feature. Now for something like Parcels, if I go in and configure a pop-up, I give it a certain name for the title. This might be something different. Parcel polygons and the source name is not going to be helpful. What I might give it up for a title is maybe parcel boundary. And what I might include is something like, maybe it's helpful to know the span. So if I click the plus here, what I can do is choose span. So what it's going to do is every time I click in a parcel, it's going to say parcel boundary and then the span number. Similarly, I can set up my pop-up contents to be a list of the field of attributes. And I go in here and configure those. And what I can do is I can specify which fields I want included in the pop-up and give it an alias if necessary. So what I can do is I can check them all on, check them all off. What I think I'm going to do is just check them all off and just pick what I want to include. So span, year, town, maybe the source name. What else? I don't know. Maybe the owner's name is helpful. Address, one, city, state, zip. It's probably good enough for now. If I want to change this, I can add the field alias in the field alias list. So I'm going to change this to zip, state, city, address, and just call this owner name. And I think the rest are probably fine. Well, we'll just call this source and click OK. So that should be good. I'm going to click OK. And now what I'll do is zoom into an area where I know there's standardized parcels. Go ahead and wait for those to start drawing. It might take a second because the parcel data set's pretty big. Here they are. I'm drawing now. So I'm going to click in here. So there we go. So you'll see there's one of two. So one is the parcel boundary, second is the forest legacy area, and you filter through those by the arrow here. So you'll notice here's my title, parcel boundary, and the span, and then list of attributes that we included with the attribute list. and that's configuring the attributes. So let's see, I got some questions here. Maybe I'll bob over here. Oh, it looks like Ryan's taking it upon himself to answer some of these questions. Thanks, Ryan. Can you edit feature symbology like an ArcMap? Yep, I'm going to get to that. Can these maps be shared outside the ANR network? Yep, going to do that. Can these maps be shared? Use the share button right above the map. Good. So maybe I'm going a little slow here. Maybe I'll pick up the pace a little bit. So I think within configure pop-up, what we can also do is, so this is the layer options. These options here will display the symbology. So here's the yellow with a gray outline. This opens up the attribute table. This next button is the style button. So this changes the style or the symbology of the layer. And you can do that by clicking that symbology or that style button. I'm going to show it again. Change style right here. And Bob, that landowner was probably blank because it might not have been populated in the join of the parcel boundary. If it was there, it would have shown up. So not all of that attribute information is shown in the. It should join to the grand list. Sometimes the owner's name aren't exactly filled out accordingly, so that might be one reason. I can show you another one in a minute. So we have different options for changing the style. So what we can do is we can show location only, or if we wanted to aggregate it out or create or like a classified symbology, we could do that as well. And what we can do is you'll see, it's going to show the acreages, and we could specify different colors for different acreage breakouts. But in this case, we're just going to show the location of the area. And what that's going to do is give us one option. So it's location, it's a single symbol. I can click the options here, and it gives me a few different options. One is the symbol, one's the transparency, and the visibility range. So the visibility range is going to stay the same, but maybe I want to change the symbol. So I click the symbol button, and it gives me two options, fill and the outline. So the fill, I'm gonna give it maybe a light green fill. I'm gonna keep it fairly subtle, but maybe I want a black outline. Now, if I wanted the fill to be hollow, so no fill, I would choose this no color option down here. It's a little hidden, so I want to make sure I pointed that out. You can specify custom colors, so if you want to match colors of, say, your program colors based off of a hexadecimal notation or HTML code, you can enter that in here as well. But I'm going to keep the fill a light green. I'm going to go with a black outline. I'm going to set the transparency pretty high because I want to be able to see through the layer, and choose OK. There are other options like you could set, I'm going to go back a second, you could set the outline to be a dash, or you have certain different dashed options. So similar, if you had a line, you would have this option. Obviously you wouldn't have a fill. You would have line and set colors. You could set your pattern, which I'll show on the trails layer in just a second. Choose OK. Let's give this some super transparency. Make it nice and subtle so we can see through it. Right about there. And choose OK. So now we just set the symbology for this particular layer. Now, it is a little limited. We're not able to do, say, like hatching, or we're not able to do line work or patterns and things like that. But we are able to control, as you saw, line work in fill, which is pretty neat. So, same with the line work. If I choose, so for trails, what I can show you is we can set this to what's the trail type, and it's going to give us some different options. So I want, say, unique symbols for the different trail types. Most trail type codes aren't necessarily helpful, but if we knew those, we could set them. We can also do trail management. That might be a better one to use. Give me some options here. So there's a bunch of them. We can group them. We can, I could choose a few to group. So it's grouped with other here because there's a bunch of different ones. But you see, I can set these lines to be different colors, different patterns. If I wanted this one dashed, I can have arrows at the beginning, at the end. There's a lot you can do. So it's pretty versatile, and wanted to point that out. But I think I'm going to leave it the way it is for now. I might not even include the trails in the map. One cool thing also that you can do is you can set a filter. So say you're only interested in vast trails, because I'm a snowmobiler. I want to see the E911 vast trails. So I think if I do trail management is, and I choose unique values, I can do, so this might be the actual clubs. Let me see, is vast in here? Hold on one second. Might not be in here. What is it listed as? Trail system? Sorry. This is me doing demos without doing much prep work, but this is how it'll go. They should be in here. Why aren't they showing up? Camel Sump State Forest. That's not it. Trail type. I think these are just the codes, so that's not going to be helpful. Sorry about that. What about trail name? Too many. So anyway, so if I wanted to show you Fellowship of the Wheel Trails, yeah, let's show Fellowship of the Wheel Trails. And I apply the filter. So now only Fellowship of the Wheel Trails are going to show up in the map. So this might be helpful if you're only interested in showing specific data for a town. So in the case of the urban tree inventory, I showed you that application that shows those urban tree inventories. Well, those are filtered by the town because I created a Heinsberg application. So anyway, I think that's most of the tools within the map. I want to get to creating application. I think we're running short on time. So I want to speed through here. If you decide you don't care to include those layers in your map, you can choose remove. So I'm actually going to remove the trails from my map because it's not important to me for this map. We can leave the parcels in there. I'm going to zoom out to the state because I'm good with my map. I want to save it. So what I can do is save as. We haven't saved it yet. Give it a title. So this is my Forest Legacy Area, AON. And tags. What are tags for? Tags are for searching for different items in your content. So you notice that when I went to search for stuff, it was searching based off of those tags. So I'm going to give it some tags that aren't included in the title because it will search within the title. So maybe FPR, program, lands, boundaries. It'll give you some suggestions. And description of the map. This is the Forest Legacy area for Forest Legacy program eligibility. Eligibility. And I can choose a folder to save it in. And then I choose Save Map. So this is saving it to my content. And what I could do now is share this with someone. So I'm going to open up Internet Explorer, paste that URL into my map, and what's it going to do? It's asking me to log in. Well, it's supposed to be for everyone, right? Well, no, it's not, because what you still have to do is you have to share the map. Now, this map is only specific to you right now, but if you wanted to share it with someone, say for citizen science or for including in your public-facing webpage, you need to share it. And this gives you a bunch of different options for sharing your map, but most everyone will want to share it with the public, so choose everyone in the public. Now, if you want to link to this map, you can use this link. Choose done. So if I use that link now, It shouldn't ask me to sign in. It should just load it. Hopefully. Fingers crossed. Yay, there's a map. That's what we created. There's our Forest Legacy area. If I choose content, we also see our parcels. So here's a pretty basic web map. And, if this is all you gave someone, it's pretty powerful, right? You included a few layers to get your base map information. If I click on it, yep, you're eligible for Forest Legacy. That's where I live. But the interface is kind of is meant for publishing and creating maps, not actually using them. So what else do we have at our fingertips? Well, we have a couple different options. One is if you wanted to embed that map in your website. So say FPR wants to put it into their Forest Legacy program page. I can click the embed in website. I can give it some specific options. I can tell it how big I want it. If I want 500 by 500, I can change it. I can include zoom control. Maybe if people want to choose their base map, they can choose from the base map gallery. Do you want to include a scale bar? Nah, probably not helpful. Location search? Yeah, definitely. I want people to be able to search by their address or a town. Include the legend. Sure, we can include that or not. You can even give it a theme. Now, what all of this is doing is controlling the HTML embed that you can then copy and paste into your program website. And it's done basically using an iframe. So copy this, paste it into your program page, done. Now you have a map that shows up in the Forest Legacy program application page. Pretty cool. But if you want to take it a step further, you can also create a web app. So the web app is going to allow you to choose from various different templates that ArcGIS Online has made available to you. One of those is a basic viewer. So if I choose basic viewer, I can even preview my map in the basic viewer before deciding that's what I want. So here we are. Here's the map of Vermont. I have some tools over here that show things like layers, details of the map. I can share it. I can even print it. I can find an address or a place. So if I want to find where I am right now, here's One National Life Drive in Montpelier. That's where I am. Zoom to it. I wonder if I'm in the Forest Legacy area. If I click on the map, no, it doesn't show it. Well, actually, I'm over here. If I click over here, am I in the Forest Legacy area? Yeah. If my property was over here, I am eligible. So this is something that you could certainly copy a URL to, and you could link the public to it just by using this basic template. Now, if I were to create that as a web app, it would give me some more options. So if I'm doing this, quickly. I chose create web app for that particular template. I'll give it a name, Forest Legacy Area AON web app. Choose done. What this is going to do is bring up a window where I can then edit the components of that basic viewer and publish that as an app. So what it's doing is it's taking that map or that web map that we created, using that as the source of this application from which we can then go in and edit the attributes or different widgets that we can set inside this basic viewer. So here we are, we have select web map. It's already selected our Forest Legacy Area AON map. I can give it a title, and it's going to default to the web map title, but maybe if we want to change it to just Forest Legacy Area, we can do that. And that'll change up here. Subtitle, Forest Legacy Program Eligibility. Sorry. Some details, we could do that. Theme, we can give it different colors. So if we wanted to change that green, we could do that. Change different options. If we wanted to, not include some tools, configure some of the search options, we can do that. Save. And it's going to implement some of those changes in the map. So here's, say, Forest Legacy Area. There's our subtitle, some of the tools in there that we can either include or exclude from a map. And now if we click launch, there's our application. So now we have created a web map with an application that has widgets that we can go in and configure, a layer with a layer list that we can expand, the legend. We can even change the opacity of the layer within the map. And that took less than an hour. You can go in and you can experiment with all the different templates that are available within the template gallery. So I'm going to close out of here. I think, where did I leave off? I want to go back to our map. So that was through the share and create a web app. There are all of these different templates that you can choose from. There's even Web App Builder, which does not set up a template, but what it allows you to do is add widgets to your map using the widget gallery. So you'll set a specific theme. So in this case, maybe the foldable theme is pretty popular. Our map is already set in there, and then we have all these different widgets that we can add to these different boxes. So here's box 1, that's widget 1. If I go in here and click widget 1, all of these are different things that I can set up. So if I want to include a layer list, include it. What do I want to do within that layer list? All these different options, include it. So now if I click this widget, it'll bring up a layer list, and I can even configure this layer list option. When I'm done with that, I go ahead and save it, and then this saves as a application within my content of my site. So what I want to do is I'm going to go over here and show you home, go to content. You want to save your changes. I'm not going to save the changes to this. So if I go over to, and I saved it in the folder, I believe it was biologic and ecologic information, should show my map in here. I think, no, it was environmental monitoring. So here's my forest legacy area feature layer and the map. I can also go in here and choose all my content and choose, say, AON or forest legacy. So you'll see our forest legacy area AON web map that we built with Web App Builder, and then this web app. So let me look over here and make sure that I'm getting through all of this. One last thing I want to show is that with all of these maps and these apps, they come with an app ID. So if I go back to the map that I created, you'll see that this has an item ID in it. So this points to this particular map from which we can also reference for other applications. So in one case, I had said, well, the map is nice, but it would be cool if we could go a step further and create just a little map window that would definitely tell the end user whether or not they were within the legacy area or not. And so what I did is I used that web app ID, embedded it into some code that I created. So if I scroll up, the map is referenced here. So we're creating the map. We create a web map based off of a portal item ID, and this ID is in reference to the map that we create. Sorry, I've got too many tabs open here within our application. So here's that ID. I insert into that code, and that code then creates a map from which I was able to add some controls, very basic controls, zoom in, zoom out, a find my location control. So it thinks I'm at the school, so it's not that great because I'm using my desktop and not GPS, but gets me in the area from which now I can then click on the map, and it should tell me whether I'm in the area or not based off of the pop-up and the data that's underlying that map. So if I click in here, nope, you're not eligible because you're not in the forest legacy area. But if I were to actually go to where that feature is, say this is my property, this is my parcel here. If I'm wondering if I'm eligible and I can't tell based off the symbology, I click on the map. Yes, you are eligible Here's the green thumbs up. You're good to go. So this is all pulling information based off of that map that we have published in ArcGIS Online. So I think that's we've gone about 7 minutes. Well, we started a little late, so we're about the hour mark right here. And I kind of went a little quickly through publishing the map and the application, but I thought it was important to give you a little preliminary information about where the content is coming from, how we publish it, and where these maps are being made. Now, you'll all have the opportunity, given your credentials, to log into ArcGIS Online to create and save these maps. So I urge everyone to go ahead and log into their account, go to my content, my map, start adding some layers, and saving some maps. And if anyone has questions about how these maps are created, send either Ryan or I an email, and we'll be happy to help you out. The goal here is to have programs and program staff creating their own web apps, so that we're not adding a ton of content to the atlas, but we're also providing the public with some dynamic options for accessing program data. So this is a good use case for providing that information to the public, just so that they could quickly zoom into their property and determine whether or not they're in the Forest Legacy area, rather than using the map that I created back in 2009. I think I still have that link here, that shows Forest Legacy area. So this is the map as it exists now. So you can see how much easier it would be to use this application to determine where you are and whether or not you're in the eligibility area, or this PDF map. So I think that's about all I have. I wanted to kind of drive that home, that these maps are easy to create. We can provide dynamic content to our end users to answer questions that should be easy to answer just given a few minutes of creating a map. So if there are any other questions, I know Ryan's been having my back on the chat window here. I think we got most of it. Any other questions? You can type it in the chat window. I'll leave it open for a couple more minutes. Maybe I take a sip of water or coffee here. Okay, I'm glad you like your map. I'll shoot these links out to everyone and get that to you by this afternoon, so you guys can get up and running and start creating some maps. I'm going to include these REST endpoints that you can use for accessing information. There's quite a bit of layers in here. They're all pre-symbolized, so shouldn't have to spend too much time symbolizing these stuffs in these dynamic maps, because it can be a time suck, but it really is pretty powerful, all that you can do creating maps in these online web mapping applications. All right, so I'm gonna leave it at that. Thanks everyone for logging in and lending me your eyes and ears for the past hour. Now get outside, enjoy the sun, and happy spring. Thanks everyone.